Hello and welcome to another session of Business English Communication. Today's topic is listening. We will be talking about how to listen to what is being said. Of course, all of us listen. We know how to listen, but the precise topic of the day is active listening. So the keywords include active listening, passive listening. So there is a difference between listening actively and listening passively. Paying attention, non-verbal cues, paraphrasing, and listening styles. So what is active listening? Active listening is the process of concentrating on what is being said rather than passively listening or hearing whatever the speaker is saying. It is the conscious effort taken to understand the speaker's message, interpret the meaning, and respond. In one of our earlier lectures, we did talk about that as speakers, as presenters, one of the things that we require of a presenter or a speaker is that to engage the audience and respond to their questions. So now we are talking from the other end of the presentation. So from the presenter's point of view, we have shifted to the vantage point of the audience. The audience has to listen. In order to ask the right question, you have to listen to whatever is being said. Otherwise, there's a lot of noise. Now, passive speaking or passive learning is more like it's just a process where you sit and listen and hear whatever is being. You're not really paying attention. It's just some sound that is happening in the background. So it is hearing, which is passive, and listening, which is active. So we generally, you may have noticed, we don't say hear me, we say listen to me. I want your attention, so listen to me. Are you listening to me? Okay. Do I hear you? One way of saying, but yes, I do. Or do you hear me? Yes. But when you say, are you listening to me? That means you want attention. And you have to pay attention to be an active listener. You have to pay attention. You have to demonstrate engagement. You also have to ask a question, provide some kind of feedback, and respond appropriately. Sometimes you have to listen to the answer that the presenter is saying or giving you the answer or response or an answer. Then you have to ask a follow-up question. That's a process of active listening. You're really paying attention. That's what is meant by active listening and not just a lot of words flying around you. When we pay attention, we give the speaker undivided attention. It means you eliminate distraction physically and mentally. So you're not doing 20 things while you're trying to listen to someone. Therefore, physical attention and mental, of course, you have to be cognitively there. You also suspend personal noise. By personal noise could be internal and external. You avoid multitasking. Multitasking is good, but it's an overrated virtue. So remember, multitasking is good in many ways, but then it can also hinder the process of actively engaging with what is in front of you. So you do not multitask when you're reading something serious. You do not multitask when you're trying to listen to something which is important. You demonstrate engagement. That means you give feedback through paraphrasing, summarizing, and clarifying questions. So you have to give your feedback. That means you are showing the speaker that you are processing their message and the information that is coming from them. You provide a feedback. So you defer judgment. You do not have a judgment. It allows the speaker to complete their thoughts without any concern that that their words may elicit premature criticism or unnecessary interruption. So defer judgment. Do not interrupt the speaker. Many people, they think that by interrupting someone's speech, they they are showing their power or their sort of, their dominance. Do not try to do that. It is, people notice these things, and in time, nobody likes to have such kind of a person who provides premature criticism or interruptions. Remember, um, interruptions like these, they disrupt the flow of communication, and then many a time a speaker may um, close down. He or she may not be uh, even interested in any kind of engagement. So it is important to have cultivate that kind of environment where you give people the time and space to express themselves, and then you ask your questions. So defer criticism, questions, and judgment till the time is appropriate. Again, talking of appropriacy, respond appropriately. Responses should be relevant. They should also acknowledge the speaker's point of view, and they should also demonstrate that the listener has been actively listening to whatever the speaker has been saying. So, appropriate responses are tailored to the speaker's needs. Um, so, whether that involves offering support or providing information or simply validating their experience. So, that's how we respond. Now, look at this example. During a performance review, Ananya tells her manager, please read the passage in front of you, Rahul, that the new project deadlines are causing her significant stress. Rahul closes his laptop, silences his phone, and turns his chair to face her, maintaining steady but relaxed eye contact while noticing her tense posture and subdued tone. As Ananya speaks, he nods, leans slightly forward with uncrossed arms, and uses brief encouragers such like, I understand, go on, so she feels safe to share more. When she finishes explaining, Rahul says, what I am hearing is that the overlapping deadlines and sudden changes are making it hard for you to keep up. Is that correct? And asks a follow-up question about which tasks consume most of our time. This is a scenario. This is an example. Okay, we move on. He sets aside his initial impulse to blame time management, avoids interrupting, and listens to her full explanation before responding. Finally, Rahul thanks her for being honest, acknowledges that she is committed but overloaded, and works with her to adjust the schedule and reassign one task, inviting her to reach out early if the workload becomes difficult again. And here is the source that I have adapted this passage from. Why do you think this is an example of active listening? So let's identify the components of what is active listening. Firstly, paying full attention. You might have noticed that while listening to Ananya's issues, he shuts down his laptop, he silences his phone and faces the speaker directly, and watches both her words and body language instead of multitasking. Many a time people do that. They say, I can hear you, just keep on talking, I know what you're saying. Okay, but here you're giving someone your full attention. You're demonstrating engagement also, eye contact. You have seen instances of nodding, leaning slightly forward, using encouraging terms or expression. I understand, go on. Providing feedback. And he paraphrases with, what I am hearing is that he's trying to understand and ask clarifying questions about which tasks are taking the most time. He's also suspending judgment. He withholds criticism, doesn't blame anyone, does not interrupt, postpones judgment until Ananya finishes explaining. And then he also responds appropriately, And which is the response is that there should be adjustment of deadlines and redistribution of tasks, etc. We see here that how good communication involves good and active listening. And then it's like a top-down process. If you don't listen to people who are below you or down there in hierarchy, then the message that you are sending is that anyone who is just above a notch or two can treat you any way you want. They want you to be treated. So it's important that the message should come directly from the top, that your managers and bosses are respectfully listening to you. It comes now, not all of us are trained that way. It comes with a lot of training, practice, and being open to conduct yourself professionally and responsibly. That is what is meant by, and all of us are, as business professionals, we are expected to conduct ourselves in a responsible and professional manner. There is a spectrum of listening styles. People listen in different ways depending on their habits and also on their goals. What do they want to achieve? Much of it depends on what they want to achieve. They recognize these listening styles. When we recognize different kinds of listening styles, we also understand, as a speaker now I'm telling you how to adapt to others and how to cultivate your or build on your natural tendencies to communicate to an audience or with an audience. Remember, people listen in different ways. It depends on, nowadays everyone wants to be entertained 24/7. It is not possible in a serious, let's say in an academic situation, in a professional business situation. It is not possible to keep people entertained throughout. But one has to, as a speaker, one needs to understand these things and try to adapt themselves to the audience. Remember, there is a spectrum of listening styles and you have to cater to that as a speaker. There's a passive learning also. Listener appears physically, mentally present, but they are actually disengaged. They may nod here and there, but it is very obvious that their minds are somewhere else. Passive listeners hear general ideas but retain little detail. For example, during meetings, passive listeners might miss important points because they were not focused completely or actively. So it's not just about being polite and not hurting the speaker's feelings. It is also important that you listen properly, actively, because much of the key information can be lost. Sometimes after an important meeting, minutes of the meetings are sent. If you are not an active listener, you may find out that you accept whatever the minutes have been sent to you. Okay, many a time they may be inaccurate. There may be some inaccuracies there. So if you have been actively listening, you would have been able to point that out. If you have been a passive listener, you didn't even listen to whatever was being said. So therefore, it leads to a lot of miscommunication and mistrust. Remember, people are often tired and bored, preoccupied with so many things. A speaker needs to engage with them, but then it is also the responsibility of the listeners to be more actively and less passively engaged with whatever is being said. There are people who depend on selective listening. They focus on only those parts that interest them. They think that this much information or this much attention from their end is enough. Subconsciously, they filter out whatever conflicts with whatever they already think, uh, and whatever. Sometimes they listen to only what is directly relevant to them. So, people who want positive news, they selectively hear only updates and the positives and whatever are the, let's say, profits, dismissing warning signs mentioned by team members. It is all, therefore, selective listening can often be very dangerous because you are listening to only the good things. See, human mind, human brain, most of us want to listen only to something that sort of, keeps us motivated and happy and in a cheerful state of mind. But unfortunately, that won't happen all the time. So, selective listening actually can be very counterproductive. Selective listening, remember, prevents honest feedback, and it also hides um, some kind of emerging problems until they become serious. So, it's important to have a very holistic picture of whatever is being said. There is also competitive listening or combative listening. The listener is more interested in promoting their own viewpoint rather than understanding the speaker. They tend to interrupt. A moment ago, I was talking about the interjectors, people who love to hear their own voices. They don't want the speaker to complete what they are saying. They have preconceived biases, prejudices, and they offer too much of criticism, they interfere, they interrupt too often. So these kinds of combative listeners or competitive listeners, they formulate counter arguments while the other person is talking, treat the conversation like a debate. Okay? For example, in a team discussion, a competitive listener may challenge ideas immediately rather than exploring them. This style often comes from it's a psychological thing, from a psychological need to be always right and to put others down and to be work in a competitive work environment. In the long run, it doesn't help anyone. Okay, so one has to be trained. Therefore, in business setups and companies should often organize training programs, at least how people to train people. One cannot change personalities, but one can at least promote some kind of attitudes and behavior that is expected of people to be more professional. Remember, competitive or combative listening undermines collaboration. It also often leads to demoralizing your colleagues. They may stop sharing ideas because no one likes to be frequently and all the time being challenged or be dismissed. There is also, we are talking about a spectrum of listening. So there is something called empathetic listening, attentive listening. This style is a step towards active listening. Attentive listeners truly focus on the speakers and understand their points, but they mostly listen quietly. Maybe they may not engage very deeply. They notice details, and emotions. They may agree with the speaker many a time. However, they hold back from giving their feedback. Attentive listening builds trust and rapport because the speaker feels heard and valued. However, without interactive feedback, there may still be problems. Lot of things may still remain unexplored. So, it is important to be extremely active. This is the fullest form of listening. Engaged listening, active listening. Active listeners are fully engaged. They not only listen, but they are also able to interact with the speaker's ideas. They ask questions. They offer relevant comments, not combative, not critical. And they use encouraging gestures and expressions. Unlike selective listeners, active listeners stay open minded. They do not twist messages to fit preconceived notions. And unlike competitive listeners, they focus on understanding rather than um, just quietly listening, actively listening. Now, unlike purely attentive listeners, active listeners respond to deepen mutual understanding. In business settings, it's important. Active listening leads to stronger bonding and rapport and relationships and leads to effective problem solving and fewer instances of misunderstandings and mistrust. How do you develop listening? Now, that one can teach how to read and how to develop vocabulary, and one can teach how to be uh, even a good speaker. Okay, but how do you listen? Listening is something that you have to work yourself upon on yourself. You have to develop a sense of your cognitive skills to such an extent that you are not distracted by a lot of external outward noise around you. You are paying your fullest attention to something that you feel is important enough to be listened to. Otherwise, there's no point. I mean, you can turn on your video and you can turn on your um, um, you can watch a video somewhere or watch a movie and at the same time do 100,000 things. You don't need to catch each and every word or listen intently, but active listening demands engagement. If you think it's worth it, then you have to train your mind that way. Teams that practice active listening often report, remember, higher progress and better productivity. So, this is an important skill, work on it. Look at this example now. This is an exercise for you. Identify the sort of listening styles used here. During a weekly sales meeting, Rohan sits at the conference table, occasionally nodding while staring at the slides, but he is mentally planning his weekend. When the manager later asks him about a new pricing change, he remembers only that something was mentioned and cannot recall the exact figures or deadlines, creating confusion and forcing others to repeat information. Second, after client presentation, a junior designer shares with their supervisor that they felt anxious and unprepared. The supervisor listens quietly, maintains eye contact, and lets the designer finish without interrupting, clearly following the details and emotions, but offers only a brief, "I understand that must have been stressful," before moving on to the next task. The designer feels heard and respected, but is what, still unsure what concrete improvements or supports will follow. Third, in a cross functional problem solving meeting, Priya describes a recurring issue with delayed shipments. Her colleague Samir turns away from his screen, listens without interrupting, and then says, "So, what I am hearing is that supplier changes and unclear handoffs are causing most of the delays. Is that right?" He asks specific follow up questions, summarizes the root causes back to the group, and collaborates on concrete steps such as redefining responsibilities and setting new checkpoints, which the team agrees to test over the next month. Here, I have given the source from where I have taken these scenarios. So the first one is an example of passive listening. Why is it passive? So Rohan nods and looks present, but his mind is on weekend plans, so he retains almost no specific detail about pricing changes. This matches passive listening. This corresponds to passive listening, where the listener only hears some words happening around them, but does not actively process. And then at the end, you have seen he is later on not able to give the exact information that he is being asked to provide. Second example is attentive. Supervisor gives full attention, makes an eye contact, there is a space to talk. There's also an example of emotional understanding, offers minimal feedback or follow through. He is attentive but minimal feedback. This fits attentive listening, where the listener genuinely understands and cares, at least appears to, yet does not fully move into interactive and problem solving response. The last one is active and engaged listening. Samir focuses on Priya, avoids interruption or interrupting, paraphrases like what I am hearing is, etc. Asks clarifying questions, follow up questions, collaborates on concrete solutions. These behaviors, okay, examples of questioning, summarizing, they are core markers of active listening in business communication. So this is what is needed. I think what the takeaway should be here is that when you listen to someone, you give your full attention if you think that it's worth listening to. If you think that whatever the presenter or the speaker is saying does not really affect you or matter to you, it's not even you, then you don't have to waste anyone's, yours as well as the speaker's time. So choose your priorities. Your priorities should be clear. If you need to, let's say, if you feel something is important enough, then you have to give your complete attention and time to that. Let's move on to talk about non-verbal communication. So a lot of communication is conveyed non-verbally, eye contact, gestures, postures, facial expressions, etc. For active listeners, it is important to pay attention to these non-verbal cues. Okay, eye contact, facial expressions, gestures. Sometimes people roll their eyes. It means I'm bored. I'm not even. And it also sends out that sort of a kind of power and hierarchical dynamic that I can roll my eye at you and I can just shrug and turn my face away. It means that you're not important enough. These are non-verbal cues. So they may not yell and shout, but that is still being dismissive. So if you want to communicate an image of being someone who is in a responsible position and you're giving attention to someone who is speaking to you, so then one has to be very careful about their non-verbal cues and also body language. Same time, it also applies to the listener. Okay, so active listeners pay attention to non-verbal cues because these non-verbal signals provide insight into the emotions and sincerity that may or may not be in the words. Non-verbal cues matter a lot, tremendously, in business situations. When someone's body language and tone align with their words, it reinforces the message. On the other hand, when they collide or when there is a conflict, the non-verbal message usually reveals the truth. For example, a colleague might say, I'm confident about this plan, but if the voice is indifferent, flat out, flat voice, tremble, eyes dart away, it means they are not too certain about the plan. Remember, a good listener, someone who is a practiced listener, they notice these cues and signals and incongruities. Therefore, it is important to ask follow-up question. Okay, even on the basis of body language and non-verbal cues. Facial expressions. So, um, let's say smiles, and I just told you, I talked about rolling one's eyes, raising eyebrows. Um, all these convey certain kinds of messages. A smile can be read or interpreted in several ways. Okay, so, a good listener, remember, so it's not just the words but also the facial expressions. So you should be able to read them, interpret them, understand them. At times people may force a smile, okay, but then it may also suggest irritation. They are just tolerating you. So nonverbal cues can help you understand real feelings, like noticing a raised brow or a furrowed brow. Okay, so these things should give you some kind of an understanding of what the listener is going through without actually saying. We also talk about posture and body language. Um, when people listen to someone or even address someone with their arms crossed, it often means that they are not open-minded enough. So it is always best to cultivate an open posture, uncross arms, leaning slightly forward, signaling that a person is receptive. And if you are a good reader of non-verbal cues, then these gestures and postures say a lot. For active listeners, you should also keep an open posture yourself so that people are interested in you. Lean in a bit when the speaker leans in, avoid blocking your chest, so like crossing your arms and stepping back. Mirror the speak's body orientation very subtly. Okay, no, you don't have to be a mimic. You can also create a rapport, but don't be very obvious in, for example, when they smile, smile back. That's what I mean, that mirror. But then you don't have to be a flat out mimic. So there's a difference. Cultivate this. How to, you have to practice that. Gestures also mean a lot. For example, some people have a very annoying habit of shaking their legs all the time. It shows that they are fidgeting and they are not really open to, or they are getting restless with the conversation. So it is better to put an end to this meeting if you feel, because see, no one will be interested in people, in someone who is shaking their leg all the time or fidgeting all the time or tapping on the desk all the time. These gestures all signal impatience and anxieties, and speakers don't like that. Yeah, it may also suggest that there is some kind of a problem. These are chaotic gestures. It might mean that the listener is terribly inattentive and on occasions frustrated. People don't want such people around. See, remember, we are talking about professional setups or settings. In professional settings, personal problems and emotions are of little importance. You have to deliver. And when you deliver, you have to present the best image of yourself forward. So that is, yeah, it doesn't matter what you're going through. So your frustrations and insecurities, as manifested through gestures such as fidgeting, shaking your leg all the time, or tapping, eyes darting here and there, not making eye contact, all these are problematic. People don't like that. So you, in a professional setup, you have to pay attention to this if you want to be taken seriously. Tone of voice matters. The way you modulate, pitch your voice. These things matter. The pace, your speaking pace also matters. Thus, a sentence can feel very differently uh, with the correct tone. Okay, so it's cool or that's fine. If you have, there is a touch of or a tinge of warmth, it may mean approval. It may also mean indifference. It's fine. Okay, that means whatever you do is okay. I don't really care. So those are the things that matter, and a good listener should be able to pay attention to the nonverbal cues and the vocal cues as well. When when you listen actively, pay attention to these vocal qualities. Remember, in your response, match your tone to the content. Always have a calm and friendly, but not an over friendly tone. Remember, again, business situation, business presentations are extremely different from other kinds of conversations. So, this is not, again, I reiterate, this is not a conversation where you have to act very familiar, because you're not among friends, you're among colleagues. So, therefore, tone matters a lot. Physical distance is important. In a business situation, maintaining 2 to 4 feet of distance is typical for comfortable conversation. If someone steps closer, they may be seeking connection or trust. Do not touch people unnecessarily, especially nowadays when people are becoming so conscious of these things, so aware about what is a good touch and a bad touch, especially even among adults. I'm not talking about children, I'm talking about adults, and therefore many things can lead you into problems if you go around touching people. Yeah. So another thing, when people shift distance during a talk, or if a colleague subconsciously retreats when a topic turns personal, it could be a sign or a signal to handle the subject uh, more sensitively. Many people don't like personal queries and questions in business or professional settings. So you don't have to, you may have met people's families, but you don't have to ask questions about their family, members of the family all the time. It makes many people uncomfortable. Um, so remember, nonverbal signals are influenced by individual habits and culture. Do not jump to conclusions. Do not have prejudices or biases. There may be different kinds of contexts and baseline behaviors. For example, some people speak naturally, they have lots of gestures, while others are reserved. So do not make, conclusions or judgments about how they speak. Instead, you should be able to focus on the content and then try to align the gestures with the content. If you are confused, then it is always better to ask a question. Am I understanding you correctly? Is that right? Do I need to repeat? Should I repeat myself? Those kinds of things. So give yourself and give the other person also a chance to clarify. Do not jump to conclusion, whether in business or life. Remember, in global teams, gestures and eye contacts, the norms vary across cultures. So do not get sort of fixated on a single cue. Instead, observe a cluster of signals. Overlapping signals reinforce the message. So therefore, the bottom line is, do not get fixated or make your decisions based on a single gesture. there can be a variety of gestures that may communicate. But when in doubt, again, ask a verbal question, always better. Now look at this slide. I have some exercises for you. Identify whether the non-verbal cues align or not. Scenario 1, agreement and engagement in a team meeting. Context, a project discussion in a workplace. Verbal cue, yes, I think this timeline works well for me. Non-verbal cues, steady eye contact, slight forward lean, relaxed shoulders, occasional nodding, calm, confident tone. Scenario 2, polite agreement, masking discomfort. The context is a workplace discussion where a junior employee responds to a senior manager. Verbal cue, yes, that sounds fine to me. Non-verbal cues, avoids eye contact, forced smile that fades quickly, arms crossed, slightly backward lean. So how do we decipher what the conversation? I mean, both of them are positive where as far as verbal cues are concerned, but is the non-verbal cues that seal the deal for you. In the first scenario or situation, the speaker's words and body language, they communicate agreement and engagement. The open posture and a steady tone reinforce sincerity and cooperation. An active listener, thus, can safely assume alignment between intention and message. On the other hand, in the second scene, while verbally agreeable, the close posture and avoidance of eye contact, it suggests a distance, a disengagement. An active listener actually should be worried about this. So, the best way to confirm is, I want to be sure, do you have any concerns you'd like to share? Or, can we go ahead with this idea? So, a verbal confirmation in this scenario would help because the non-verbal cues are quite confusing here. They may communicate a kind of a contradictory message. So, to master or to improve or to control your active listening, practice specific verbal and non-verbal techniques. These skills work together to ensure that you truly understand the speaker and they too should feel that they are listened to. Paraphrasing is a good way of being a good listener. Restate the speaker's main points in your own words. This shows you are processing their message and allows them to correct any misunderstanding. For example, you might say, it sounds like you are saying that the project deadline worries you because the team is understaffed. Is that correct? Have I got that right? This is just an example. Avoid simply repeating their exact words. Instead, paraphrase or synthesize the message. You should also reflect emotions. A good listener reflects emotions. So, acknowledge and name the speaker's emotions. For example, if a colleague says, we have worked so hard and this client is still rejected, you might respond, I understand, you must be feeling frustrated and discouraged. So, emotions also occasionally matter. This does not necessarily mean that you agree with their perspective, but it sort of validates their feelings. And also, a good listener also has the habit or has the skill to summarize. After a long discussion, provide a concise summary of what was discussed. For example, to recap, we have identified 3 main issues: unclear goal, communication breakdown, and resource gaps. So, you can, the follow-up question would be, does that sound accurate? So, in other words, you have summarized by whatever the speaker was saying. To recap, we have identified three main issues: unclear goals, communication breakdown, and resource gaps. Does that sound accurate? So, or is that accurate? Is that right? What does it do? It has summarizing has ensured that the speaker and the listeners share the same understanding of the key points. So, even as a listener, you can summarize the speaker's points and ask them to um, reaffirm whatever you have understood. Again, what does it signal? It signals that the listener has been attentive throughout the conversation. Always ask clarifying questions. Do not be afraid, otherwise it's you who is going to miss out on a lot of things. Instead of assuming meanings, ask questions that invite more explanation or even details. Use open-ended and specific questions. Avoid yes/no kind of questions. And remember that genuine, curious questions deepen your insights into the speaker's thoughts. Always keep a supportive tone to show your interest rather than your criticism and judgment. One has to be also attuned to non-verbal listening behaviors. For example, eye contact, open posture, and showing some kind of micro encouragement towards the listener. It is not just the speaker's responsibility to maintain eye contact. Many a time, listeners do not reciprocate. It is important as listeners we maintain regular natural eye contact to show attentiveness. Look at the speaker when it is appropriate, not to stare them down or to break them down, but to communicate some kind of engagement. A gentle nod is also welcome, because the speaker then would know that you are with the speaker on the same page. But make the non-verbal cues always more natural. For example, sometimes people go overboard with facial expressions. Remember, facial expressions match the tone of the conversations. If the speaker shares happy news, respond with a warm smile. There should be a look of pleasure. If they convey disappointment, then look concerned or empathetic. There shouldn't be a mismatch between what you're listening to and what your face is expressing. Goes without saying that when you are listening to someone and it's an important piece of information or presentation, then phones and other distractions should always be put away. Silence, notifications, and other sounds that phones and contraptions and gadgets make nowadays. If you need to take notes, do so, but quietly. Do not fidget with objects or looking around the room. These behaviors signal that your attention is divided. It also creates a lot of distraction among the group. Now, based on whatever we have learned so far, identify the appropriate responses in a couple of scenarios. So, I am going to give you a couple of, just listen to me. In a mid-semester project review meeting at a university, a student team member approaches the group leader privately saying, "I'm trying my best, but I feel overwhelmed and worried. I let everyone down because I am handling too many tasks." Now, what should be the answer? The group leader practices active listening by maintaining steady eye contact, adopting an open posture, nodding occasionally, and putting the phone aside. They respond, or possible positive response could be, "So if I understand you correctly, your feeling is stressed because the workload is uneven and you are afraid it might affect the team's outcome." So notice, and if you notice the students' expressions, okay, the student leader can also ask, um, or the student representative can also ask, uh, it sounds or it feels like you are feeling anxious and pressured. This reflects emotions. So it is important that a leader, a group leader, a team leader has that kind of ability to maintain or to strike some kind of empathy with um, the people who are talking or interacting with them. Also summarize, we are dealing with a workload imbalance, tight deadlines, lack of backup support, etc. So these things are important. To summarize, to listen, to be empathetic, these all constitute a good, active, engaged listener. This is how you cultivate and develop your listening skills. There should be an element of self-reflection and self-assessment. Start by noticing your own listening habits. Do you tend to, are you inclined to interrupt or finish other people's sentences? Is it true that your mind wanders away during discussions? Are there topics that make you defensive? Ask yourself. So, self assessment, self check, and also seek feedback. Ask colleagues or mentors for input on your listening. I know many people don't like to do that, but it is always important, because if you want a long term career, a serious career, then you should be able to seek feedback on your own attitudes and behaviors and practices. Have a better control on your external environment. Control what you can do in your surroundings. Choose quiet, private spaces for conversations. Organize your schedule so that important meetings happen when you and others are um, uh, uh, at their maximum and at the top of their productivity. Yes, we have been talking about nonverbal cues and some kinds of messaging that happen that take place in across cultures. So I just refer to that. Do not jump to conclusions, especially in a global environment. We have so much of um, we have so much of cross cultural or intercultural communication and interaction. It's important that we have some uh, idea of how different cultures behave in different kinds of settings. Here is an interesting piece for you. I have given the source at the bottom of each slide. Let's read this. The title is Handshake or Hug, Knowing Intercultural Greetings. How we greet, how people across cultures greet one another. Let's take a look. Culture is not ethnic or racial. It is learned, and we have to appreciate that each culture is different. It is important, therefore, to treat everyone like a unique individual as you would like to be treated, and not to get fixated on his stereotypes. Also, one must develop one's emotional intelligence to be more intuitive about how to communicate with, negotiate with, and interact with people from cultural backgrounds other than one's own. For example, in South Texas, if one is talking to a male, they will stand at a 90-degree angle to the speaker. If you move, your interlocutor will shift too. This is a markedly non-intimate position, and often the eyes are cast down at the floor or out across the floor, not at the other party. South Texas generally say, "Pleased to know you," while Midwesterners say, "Pleased to meet you." And in San Antonio, Texas, in a strictly social setting, it is not customary to shake hands with women. Next slide. In business contexts, one should be aware that most of the world does not greet by shaking hands. People from Asian cultures bow in greetings, but the bows are different. People from Cambodia and Laos will often bow with both hands together in front of the chest as if praying. In Japan, the depth of the bow signifies the level of respect for the other party. Many Koreans prefer bowing, and if they shake hands, the right hand is supported at the wrist by the left hand to show respect. Thais bow with palms together about chest high with their fingers outstretched, and there are exceptions. The Taiwanese usually nod the head in recognition rather than bow. Some cultures, such as native Hawaiians and Mexicans, greet by hugging. Immigrant men from the Middle East often shake hands with a slight nod or bow and then exchange kisses on both cheeks. One should shake hands with a Middle Eastern woman only when she extends her hand. Next slide. In the Middle East, one of the most insulting things you can do is sit with your legs crossed so the bottom of your foot is pointed in the other person's direction. To show someone the bottom of your foot means you're looking for a fight. Even handshaking cultures such as England, France, Germany, Italy, and the US do it differently. If the British prefer a brief but firm handshake, the French prefer a light grip while sharing one gentle single shake that is quickly withdrawn. Germans will give a very firm handshake, just one pump, then quick withdrawal. More than one shake with Germans or French is considered aggressive. Italians will shake hands and then hug friends or kiss them on both cheeks. I've given the source here. Here is your exercise. Identify the locations for the following attitudes. The country where it is considered an insult when the bottom of your foot is pointed in the other person's direction. The country where people hug friends or kiss them on both cheeks. The people here often cast their eyes down at the floor or out across the floor, not at the other person. Number 4, people usually nod the head in recognition rather than bow. Number 5, in this country, the depth of the bow signifies the level of respect for the other party. Take a moment and try to identify the answers. And here are your answers. First, the country, actually it should be the place where it is considered an insult, where the bottom of your foot is pointed in the other person's direction. It's Middle East. Of course, Middle East is not one country but a group of countries. So, the same idea applies. Second, the country where people hug friends or kiss them on both cheeks, Italy. Third, the people here often cast their eyes down at the floor or out across the floor, not at the other person, South Texas. Number 4, people usually nod the head in recognition rather than bow, Taiwan. Number 5, in this country, the depth of the bow signifies the level of respect for the other party. The answer is Japan. So, I hope this was useful and entertaining for you, and thanks a lot for joining. We'll meet again for our next topic. Thanks a lot.